Bam! What's going on, folks? MC is in the house. All right. My name is Justin Garcia, also known as Master Chim, and welcome to the Warrior Stream. I'm here every Wednesday at noon Eastern Standard Time, taking a topic, deep diving, having a good time while doing it. Joined usually by my usuals. Is that the term we're going with? I guess. And to that, whoever's watching now, do me a favor. Let me know that you're watching so I can give you a shout. Judge Cohen in the house. What's up, brother, man? Jesse, good to see you. Corey, what's going on? Yarn Saxa, good to see you, Don. All right, as you guys jump on, feel free to say hello. While you guys are doing that, if you are not getting my emails, you are messing up. The link is going to be in the description, depending on whether you're watching on YouTube or one of the Facebook channels right now that I'm streaming to. If you are driving and can't write it down, Jamie, what's up, brother, man? Good to see you. If you are driving or in other ways unable to write it down, you can go to masterchim.com/email, and it will bring you to where you need to be. There goes my wife. Now, my wife claims that I called her a witch on one of these things, which I do not recall. But notice that is not me saying that I didn't say it. I just don't remember. But she's not a witch. She's a wife, and she's a pretty good one. So I keep her around. All right, but what else is going on? Corey says, just got a backyard kettlebell workout in the heat. Feels great. Awesome. Very good. I got my movement is mandatory shirt on, so I absolutely support that. Every morning I start with a routine that involves mobility drills, a little bit of movement, just getting the body awake, alive, and ready to work. Later on, I'll be going on my last hike for the month of July. If you guys recall, I've been doing 1 month a day. I haven't been doing that. Feels like that sometimes, but one hike a day for the month of July. And at the end of today's hike, I'll be able to sort of tally, I guess, the totals that I accumulated during the 31 days of July. But I'd be lying if I said I was not happy that this month is over, because I need to get back to a regular routine. The hikes obviously will still continue, but I used it as a good sort of launching pad for this next phase of physical training that I'm going to be exposing myself to. So I'll be doing that later on, and probably too fitting in the weights before the day's done. But we'll see how that happens. James says, definitely watching in a boring-ass meeting for work. Right on. Glad to give you some reprieve from the rat race. But all right, so we do have a good topic planned for today. One of the topics that I talk about quite often, not only in these types of content generating sessions, but also in my coaching. It is one of the silent killers of one's potential, right? James said, "Where can I pick up that shirt? I still have my Tribe First." That's awesome. That's a classic right there, the My Tribe First. You can go to the link will be in the description, but if you go to mcwarriorwear.com, that's where I sell all my shirts. So it should be there. But the topic that we're covering today is really about who you're hanging out with. It's the group of people in your life that you have grown accustomed to, that you have anchored so many of your rituals to, but may or may not be in your best interest when talking about your potential. Worth considering is there are some people who would choose to hang around the same friends that they have, then improve themselves. And I think that's a good place as any to start. So let's talk about this idea of the thermostat, right? So I've heard this said before, but I think it was Brian Tracy that coined it, and he used it in the application of a financial thermostat. The idea being there's a certain amount of money people make, and then they hit that thermostat. Subconsciously, they start to self-sabotage or reduce their production to bring them back to where they're comfortable. In other words, their mind, their subconscious is telling them you're making too much money, so you need to make less. And they start to manifest that in how they're acting. Well, similarly, you will have a friend thermostat. And whereas in the financial application, we're talking about income, in the friend application, I would say we could probably label it with or fill the value with comfort, right? Support, maybe even. The idea is if you're hanging around people who are not doing that much better than you, it's not a lot of pressure for you to necessarily move anywhere. If every single time you go to move in a direction that improves you and they're not following with you, there is a tension that winds up being created as a result. There is a book I'd recommend. It's by a gentleman named Robert Fritz called The Path of Least Resistance. And I give him credit for this model that I'm going to share, but it's certainly appropriate in this application. And his model is this concept of oscillation. And the way that he describes it is when we find ourselves stuck in a situation, and a group of friends is one such example, every single time we become dissatisfied with our friend group and we decide to start pushing forward and becoming more, that initial desire of improving yourself because of the dissatisfaction creates a tension moving forward. So we start to move forward. But then what happens as we start to move towards that goal, there starts to be that tension that accumulates from maybe the guilt, maybe the change that we're not used to. But whatever it is, we now experience a tension behind us. And the way Fritz describes it is we're caught between those two destinations. You know, we want to improve, that's the tension. But as we get closer, this rubber band that's on our back starts to increase tension and pull us back. And most people spend their lives doing that in many different ways. Friends is the example that I'm using today. So if you have somebody that, or if you have a group of people that are not looking to have you improve, are not themselves improving and creating pressure on you, then you have to acknowledge there's always going to be that tension if left uncorrected, right? So I grew up with a bunch of guys, like a lot of people. A lot of guys have, childhood friends. I have my own group of childhood friends, and a lot of them I'm still actually in contact with. I don't necessarily hang out with any of them. I live in Pennsylvania now. There's a lot of logistical reasons for that, but I am still connected to quite a few. But the overwhelming majority of them, I no longer have anything to do with. Now, it's not that there was some sort of conflict. It's not that there was, this one event that led us to go our separate ways. I think it just makes sense, and I think you guys can relate, and you have your own examples of this. Sometimes people just grow in different directions. And if we look at an alliance, and I talk about this in TRIBALNOMICS, in an alliance, you have one identity, another identity. When they are overlapped, that overlapped area is the commonality that sort of allows the alliance to sustain itself. Well, if two people are growing in different directions, it just makes sense that at some point they're no longer going to have anything in common. And I will say, as somebody engages their life and finds themselves investing their time and energy in growth, you will have less bandwidth, less resources to continually invest in the whole idea of remember when. Memories are valuable in that they allow us to educate ourselves. They allow us to empower ourselves. But the context of the education and the empowerment is in what we're going to do moving forward into the future. So just because we used to hang out does not mean that somehow we are obligated to hang out in the future. There needs to be a little bit more of a pragmatic lens that we use in that way. Now, aside from, let's talk about another application of this. aside from this idea of your friends not growing and you feeling a tension because of it, let's talk instead about why, even if we're aware of this tension, we still choose to hang around our friends. I'm going to give you I'll give you an analogy. Let's pretend you want to go with one of your friends to a fancy restaurant. I like eating. I'm from New York. A lot of restaurant analogies, a lot of pizza shop analogies. So just go with it. You decide with your friend to go to a fancy restaurant. And you go, hey, I want to go to this fancy restaurant. And he goes, okay, sounds like a good idea. And you tell him, maybe you feel that you need to mention it. We'll go half. We'll split it. And he says, okay. I know it's weird. Just go with it. We go to the restaurant. Bill comes. It's $100. Again, just go with it. All right, it's $100. He says, well, I only got $40. It's like, all right, well, you said you're going to go half. The bill's $150 each. You only have $40. I got the 10. Don't worry about it. He says, all right, appreciate it. Ask him again. Hey, you want to go to that restaurant we went to the other day? Yeah, sounds great. All right, just make sure you bring some money with you, because I want you to cover the bill. Don't worry about it. Of course, I'll bring money with me. Don't worry. You go. Bill comes, $100. He's only got $40. Here we go again. Don't worry about it. It's only $10. I'll get it. He says, all right, appreciate it. Next time the thing comes and you ask him and said, listen, I'm not going to ask you to pay for the times that I paid for before, but I want to go to this restaurant. If you want to go, you got to bring $50 with you. I want to see the $50 before you go. And then suddenly he gets offended. Now he looks at you and he goes, what, you don't think I'm good for $50? And you say, if you're being honest, well, actually, I don't know if you're good for $50 because I asked you to bring it with you twice and you only came up with 40 each time. So I don't know if you're good for 50, but you know what? I want to make a decision right now. Am I paying 50 and going half, or am I paying 60 and covering you a little bit for the bill? Guy gets offended. He winds up going his own way. And now, because you've actually called him on his bullshit, he uses that to populate the narrative that somehow you're fucked up. We have people in our lives right now like that. We have people in our lives that we are constantly compensating for. And every once in a while, they'll say something and you'll take them at face value, and then they'll come up a little short and you make up the difference, and it happens over and over again. And if you ever call them on it, the overwhelming majority of times, let's just say that I have some reps with this, the overwhelming majority of times is people take offense. They take offense that you are actually calling them on their nonsense and holding them accountable for the credibility, the credit, the status even that they are trying to enjoy without ever having to do their share in maintaining it. Well, here's the thing. Let's go back to the restaurant analogy. Ultimately, what will happen is you will find out that there are going to be some guys that you can rely on to always pull their weight, to always pay their share. And it doesn't mean that they're always going to have the money. But what it means is if they don't have the money, they won't agree to go to the restaurant in the first place. So that is what is happening. You're discovering who of your friends will say no because they can't pull their own weight. Some guys are so capable, so proud that they will never allow themselves to sort of make promises that they can't fulfill, right? They won't write checks that they can't cash, in other words. In my experience, though, while you are discovering who those people are amongst the people you already know, what winds up happening is you start making friends with people who are already at the restaurant. In my life, there have been people who I've never had a fight with, but I can't say I've never had a problem with. It was difficult for me, where I grew up and the group that I grew up in. And listen, I didn't grow up in some third world fucking country, some war-torn country where, people are eating dogs and shooting neighbors or anything like that. So don't get it twisted. My childhood, I would say, is more typical than maybe I imply sometimes. But just to bring it back to earth, like a lot of you guys, I just had a bunch of friends growing up. But atypical, in my experience, I always wanted more. I always wanted to push. I always wanted to learn more. I was never comfortable accepting deficiencies and shortcomings of mine. I wanted to be a fucking superhero, and there's a point where I had to acknowledge, yeah, some of these friends that are really good friends of mine, they don't want to do that with me. They don't want to do that too for themselves. Why am I going to continue to hang out with them? And it just wound up becoming a realization of, this is just not going to work. Now, I would say that I was never really insecure. I don't think I'd ever use that word to describe myself. I had my own deficiencies, don't get me wrong, but insecurity, like a lack of belief in myself, I would never say was one of them. So I do think it was easy for me, and easy in context, to grow apart from people that I was connected to without the tension in the form of guilt, or some sense of obligation. I've always been with these guys, so I should always be with these guys, in other words. I was never really burdened by that. And if guys were moving in the way I was moving, then we can move together. But if they weren't, then hey, take it easy. Nice knowing you. And it wasn't really something that I had an issue with. But as time went on, I allowed myself to develop a criteria for who it was that I was going to build these alliances with. I couldn't spend time and hang out with people that weren't looking to improve themselves. I couldn't hang out and spend time with people that were comfortable with their deficiencies that they were smart enough to see, maybe even in some cases, deficiencies that I was, comfortable enough articulating to them. But that's settling for the sake of comfort, or just the aversion to fear, the aversion to risk that some of these people would have. It really wasn't something that I needed to sort of wait for permission to be able to address. So you'll have individuals that'll hold you back, but then you'll have other individuals that are willing to go wherever you're going, so long as you're the one paying the bill, as it were. Now, this doesn't just mean a money thing. Sometimes it means, taking risk. It means exposing yourself to new situations, and people are completely comfortable, just going down the path that you've already blazed for them, so to speak. But that's not really how we grow, right? That's not really how we grow. I look at, my wife and 4 kids. I work really hard to make sure that I have the resources that I bring into the house so that my wife and I could have a strong household, raise 4 strong children. Like, there is a context to our roles. But to have a grown man be attached to me and still expect me to pay for everything, still expect me to provide for him, sounds kind of gay when you say it out loud. But there are grown men that I've been attached to in my adult life that had this sort of entitlement and expectation that I was supposed to continue to make life comfortable for them. And their argument really never went beyond, well, because you're more capable. Because you're the guy with the business, because you're the guy making the money, because you're the guy with the stuff. Well, obviously you should take care of everybody else. But that's the thing. I didn't push to develop anything that I've been successful with in my life, just to provide for people who didn't want to take those risks or make those moves. So getting back to the point of the talk today, and I'll talk for a couple more minutes. Then I see you guys got a bunch of questions and stuff. So keep writing them down. I'll hit them when I'm done. But then it begs the question, the idea of being surrounded by loser friends doesn't have to be a money thing, right? So many times when I talk, people get uncomfortable and they try to dismiss my message as, oh, he's just about money. He's just always talking about business and money. It's like, all right, if that's the label that makes you more comfortable rejecting my message, then listen, it's your life. Do what you want to do. Lose however you want. But if we do have a criteria for what a winner is and what a loser is, then it doesn't take much processing to then create a list of what a winner does and what a loser does. If you were to apply whatever criteria you could design for a winner and a loser in terms of actions, and then take those 2 lists and overlay it on the individuals that you spend the most time with, you'll start to have some insight as to some of the problems that you have. Now, there are plenty of times, and I alluded to this earlier, where an individual doesn't want to get any better. He is the loser friend, right? And that is something that we need to realize. But to be honest, in the context of this talk, that's not really the type of individual that I'm addressing today. I'm addressing the individual who knows they could be more, who knows they should be doing more, but they're not willing to change their environment in order to do so. And one of the easiest ways to not change the environment is to create this narrative that you are loyal, right? And because I'm so loyal, I'm never going to leave my people. Well, here's the thing. I don't think you're going to find many people more loyal than me, but I will drop a loser like a fucking hot potato in a second. It has nothing to do with loyalty. One of my phrases that I shared a couple of years ago for the first time, loyalty is an investment, not a debt. Because you and I are connected, I am not indebted beyond my obligations and oaths. But if I make a commitment to a level of movement with somebody and they decide to alter the trajectory of their end of that agreement, we no longer are obligated to one another at all. It's like you are changing the terms of the agreement. I've had people, in my life that any successes that I've had, and listen, I'm not a fucking billionaire. I'm not this guy that's, that's on top of the world in every way you can consider it. So I don't mean to put myself in that category, but I am somebody who came from somewhere and is now here and eagerly look forward to where I will eventually be. I'm one of those guys. And there have been people in the past that when I have climbed my own ladder of development, it shined a light on where they were in their lives. It put a mirror in front of them, and that made them uncomfortable. You'll notice sometimes when you start having things go your way, if you're paying attention, you'll see that a lot of people, the good people in your life, are going to be happy for you. Not only are they happy for you because they're empathetic and they want to see you succeed, but they also, whether it's conscious or not, understand that the rising tide raises all ships. If you're doing better, then you're in a situation where at least you're more stable, right? So I won't have to ever look at you as a liability, minimally, right? But maximally, looking at the best case scenario, you're actually going to help me get to where I'm trying to go. But there are people who they're not interested in that rising tide. They're not interested in having their ship go anywhere other than where it is right now. And when you start making those moves, they will start engaging you in ways to sort of mitigate that ascension. They don't want you to keep climbing that ladder. They want to talk to you about, you know what? It's not all about money. You think it's all about money. It's not all. It's like nobody said life's all about money, but last I checked, they don't take fucking hugs and handshakes at the supermarket. So we have to be a little realistic here, right? But they'll start things like, oh yeah, well, I prefer developing this aspect of my life or that aspect of my life. Listen, something I get a lot from individuals, especially haters on the internet, of which I have a fair share proudly, is, I don't have a six-pack. Number one, I'll tell you, I've actually competed in bodybuilding without a six-pack. So me and six-packs probably ain't going to jive. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that I can't stand to lose a few pounds like most people. But I always got a plan. I'm always moving in a direction to achieve that plan. But you'll have people that'll be the thing. They'll say, well, look at MC. He's not shredded. He's not ripped. And it's like, okay, but you are shredded and ripped. But it doesn't seem like that's ever been an issue for you, right? It would be like Shaquille O'Neal looking at me and going, yeah, but look how short you are. As if he actually played a role in being 7 foot plus. You have individuals that they become addicted to emphasizing their superpowers, things they're already good at. They decide to make the theme of their identity. And then all of the deficiencies in their lives, they hide behind that superpower. You'll have the guy that's in great shape Everything that he talks about is being in great shape. Every criticism he has for people is for not being in great shape. You'll have the guy that makes a shit ton of money. Everything he says is judging people on how much money they make or don't make, and all the things that he's able to buy that they're not able to buy. Maybe the guy that's in great shape doesn't know how to provide for his family. Maybe the guy who's making a shit ton of money doesn't even have a family to provide for. So he has the ability to spend money on toys and trinkets and whatnot, right? If my wife and I were dysfunctional people and decided to not have children, like shit, who knows what we would have done by now? We've been married 20 years and, I've made a lot of fucking money in 20 years, but I wouldn't trade anything, for one of my children. I consider myself to be one of the wealthiest men alive because of what I've been able to build. So the idea of it is the concept that I'm trying to illustrate here is you'll have individuals in your life that will never address their deficiencies. And you have to understand that if the people you're surrounded by are not addressing their deficiencies, then it's going to be, unless you do something about it, it's going to be the unsaid, unwritten agreement that nobody calls each other out on their deficiencies, right? Obviously, I have a mother. All of you guys have mothers. Hopefully for you guys, she's still around. Mine's still around. And my mother mothers me, right? I remember I'll share this story with you. When I was arrested as a teenager, I was a bit of a wild animal when I was a teenager. And I had gotten arrested. I was in a precinct once. This was in Westchester, New York. Was it in what? Yeah, I think this time was in Westchester. And she was called in. I was arrested, and she came into the precinct, and the detectives are describing to her, what I was accused of. And she let them finish. And she said, "There's no fucking way my son did that." And as she's saying that, she's sitting next to me. I put my hand on her lap, like, "Ma, like, let him finish." Without missing a beat, she looked at the detectives and she said, "And if he did, that fucking kid deserved it." Without missing a beat. That's what moms do, right? You guys would be fortunate to have a mother like mine, in terms of irrational support, like ride or die down for the cause, but probably not helpful, in the grand scheme of things. Well, you'll have people in your life who they'll say everything's okay. They say, "Yeah, that's great. You're doing that. That's great. Everything's, you don't have to do this. You could change, be comfortable where you are. It's all about being happy." And you'll have friends that are speaking to you like mothers should. Well, here's the thing. One of the energies that complements the mother energy is the father energy. And what does the father energy do? What does that do? It takes individuals and it pressures them to get out of their little safety zone. It pops the bubble that they're protected by, oftentimes the bubble that the mother created around them, right? And the father exposes them to reality and says, "Listen, I don't give a fuck what you think. This is what the world demands. So either you pay what it demands or not. There's no negotiation," right? Reality doesn't grade on a curve. And that's what the father energy does. So there is this, mother-father energy dynamic that allows people just enough support, but just enough positive feedback, realistic feedback, to keep them connected to their process of improvement. Well, some people have a bunch of friends that maybe they've never looked at them this way, they've never labeled them this way, but it's almost like a bunch of moms. No matter what you do, it's okay with them. No matter how hard you try or how hard you don't try, it's okay with them. Do this, do that, doesn't matter. It's okay with them. They never pressure you. They never say, "Hey, maybe you should get your shit together. Hey, maybe you're partying too much. Hey, maybe you should stop banging everything that you see on the weekends. Maybe you should start, investing in your education. Maybe you should start making a little more money. Maybe you should take better care of, or maybe spend some more time with your kids." Sometimes we have friend groups that don't say things like that. You have friendships that more generally that would fall out of the bounds of what would be appropriate in the friendships and the relationships. I'm not that guy. If you're fucking up, depending on who you are and where you are mentally, like it'll be some version of comfortable or not, but you're going to get it. You're going to hear what you need to hear. I've had many friendships over the years that didn't survive that feedback. I have other friends that I've had for many, many years that love me for that, because they know that if they touch base with me, I'm going to give them the truth as I see it, right? And oftentimes tell them what they need to hear. And a lot of times I'm the only one, which sucks for them, but I'm the only one that could do that for them. So I ask you again, when you're looking at your friend group, do you have a bunch of people that are calling you on your bullshit? Do you have a bunch of people that when you succeed, they somehow get depressed? When you're happy, they're sad. And why is that? Are you surrounded by people that when you win, they win? When you lose, they lose? That's the question we got to ask. I've coached a lot of men over the last 20 years. And, sometimes it's a business thing. Sometimes it's a martial arts thing. Sometimes it's, life coaching. And a very, very common culprit for what I would consider to be underachievement on their part is the people they surround themselves with. There are family members that I don't spend any time with because they're fucking losers. And how do I know they're losers? Because there is no objective list that I could create of what losers do that they don't qualify for the majority of the list. And if I'm being honest, it's like, yeah, they're a fucking loser. Yeah, but, he's family. Well, your family's full of fucking losers. So I guess you come from the loser family. So I guess it's okay for you to be the next generation of a fucking loser. I don't subscribe to those frames. I don't think that that's the plan. I don't think somebody shows me when I'm born who I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. That's not how I operate. Investment, not a debt. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about loyalty. Let's get into some of these questions. All right. NPC 1360 asks, what if I hang out with no one? Bear is the back of the brotherless man. I would say hanging out with no one is a sure way to become a loser. I'm not calling you a loser. You might be a loser. I don't know you. You might not be a loser. But loners are losers. And I'll give you a little backdrop on that. I was once a loser who thought being a loner was the thing to do. When I was much younger, I remember I grew up reading the Wolverine comic books, right? And Wolverine was the man. I used to like reading Wolverine comics. I used to like reading vampire novels of these guys that basically just did whatever the fuck they want by themselves. And why was that? It's because all of the associations I had at that point in my life were unproductive. I was the guy who had so many bad reps that he started to overgeneralize. Because I had a bunch of shitty friends, friends must be terrible. I didn't have enough experience and enough information to really create the point of reference where it's like, well, maybe these friends are shitty, and I had to evolve out of that. And when I did, I mean, even to this day, I'll give you an example. I was on a mastermind call this morning with my guys, and I had said that I have this paradox in my life as I see it, whereby nothing fascinates me more than the dynamic of men interacting with each other, from leadership and self-improvement, actualization, all these different things that personalities do together. But simultaneously, I cannot stand to be in front of people and deal with people. And one of the guys in the group actually pushed back and he said, well, I disagree. He goes, because when you're with the people that you're connected to, using my words now, like I'm never more alive than that. The energy is never higher. And I agree, even doing talks like this, right? Like this gets me fired up. I have that energy. But when I am talking to people who I will just blanketly label the uninitiated, right? It's a drain on my energy. It is a fucking drain. I'd rather not deal with them. I put on the fake smiles and I put on the facade, but it's not something that I could sustain. It's a very mission-driven mask that I wear when dealing with people who are disconnected from the things that I define myself by. So what I would offer as some advice, if I could be so bold as to offer some, is that when we move alone in a way that stays loyal to a mission, we will find people along the way that vibe with where we're going. I used the restaurant metaphor earlier, where I said, going to a fancy restaurant, it's hard bringing somebody that's going to pay their way. But eventually you do that enough, you will meet people at the restaurant that didn't show up with any of the deficiencies that the people that you showed up with had. Right? So all for that. Aaron, what's up, Aaron? Aaron says, how many times is it going to be just $10 before it suddenly becomes more and they use your friendship to get free shit for stuff for cheaper? I'd forgive it once, but if it happened again, I'd be like, sorry, I don't mind going for dinner with you, but we're going to go somewhere cheaper next time, or maybe get a couple less drinks. I have a talk. I agree with you completely. I have a talk called The Parasite Killer. And I think if you DM me, I forget my own fucking business designs. I think if you DM me Parasite, it automatically will send you the link to that talk that I did. And I would suggest anybody that wants to hear about that, it doesn't work on YouTube. It just works on Facebook and Instagram. DM me Parasite, and it's there. Or you can go to the free group that's in the description, even if you're on YouTube, the 3roadstribe.com. Go there, go to the classroom, find The Parasite Killer. It's a great talk that I gave. A little biased, but I say that because of how much value that I got feedback from other people about it. So definitely worth checking out. James Kidder says, fuck comfort. I'm busting my ass trying to get out of the crippling depression that's tried to destroy me for 3 years after losing my brother, best friend to cancer, and darn near losing my father to several massive strokes. I became chief of my tribe and head of my table by default. And I think that's what good men do. And I say good, not as some sort of just generalized blanket term. I mean good as in valuable, as in functional, as in worthy of an investment by people you're connected to. It's like obstacles are opportunities, and it's very hard to have gratitude for the weight that's making you stronger when it's on the bar that you're currently struggling to lift. Right? There's a point where we have to codify our awareness of the opportunities that these obstacles represent. Because if we just try to adorn that mindset in the middle of one of these obstacles, much more difficult a challenge for us to succeed, right? It's very hard to appreciate the pains and the struggles that you're going through while you're going through them. Yet we could very easily say, I'm a product of overcoming all of the struggles that were put in front of me until now, right? So a little bit of a ritualistic approach to building gratitude for those obstacles is what I advocate for everybody, right? But good on you that you stepped up to the plate. Magoo says, you can't be a bum hanging around MC. It's true. Magoo's one of my students in my academy in the Bronx, and he's seen me interact with plenty of people in many different directions because of all the topics discussed today. Yarn Sachs asks, so would you tell someone to keep an alliance with a person even if they had previously caused issues in your life or relationships to sell services? I don't personally, but I know people do. Okay, so let me reread that. Would you tell someone to keep an alliance with a person, even if they had previously caused issues in your life or relationship, just to sell services? I don't personally, but I know people who do. So my take is, if we look at it coldly, look at it as math, there's a reason why in our consumerist society, we have credit scores, right? And the credit score is like the number that somebody who doesn't know us can look and assign a certain level of risk to investing in us. I think people, by and large, do have an issue having such a criteria to determine the risk of an individual in the form of investment. There are some people where it's the whole fool me once, it's shame on you, fool me twice, it's shame on me. That whole idea is really begging the question, like, how do we allow somebody who screwed us over once to do it again? And the answer is you ignore the first time, or you don't assign any consequences for them screwing you over the first time. And, I was once at a business like event, and a guy was talking about a salesman that he had in his business. And he said his salesman was the best salesman that he had, but it was a problem. It was a personal problem. Like, the guy was an asshole. He's a little bit of a loose cannon. And he said it culminated in one day, the guy pulling a pistol on him in a supermarket, right? Like getting into an argument, whatever. After that event, the guy who was speaking at the event I was at said that he hired him just because, the guy's a little crazy. All right, he pulled the gun, like whatever. But, the guy was an incredible salesman. That is a level of business that I will never subscribe to, whereby we will say, I'm going to overlook this individual pulling a gun on me because he will close more people in business and make me more money. That's not something that I'm willing to do, because what winds up happening is you surround yourself by people who are disproportionately giving you a return in one form, in this case, money, but are going to be deficient in every other area that you would want your social circle to be capable of in its entirety, right? Hang out with a bunch of, it's like how many times you hear the story or you see it reproduced in movies where, there's no honor amongst thieves. A bunch of guys rob a bank, and after the bank's robbed, they start fucking each other over, shooting each other, because they're pieces of shit. Like, the only thing worse than being a piece of shit is to create a team that of pieces of shit that you're on. It's like, it doesn't get better. It gets worse, right? If you move 10 paces in the wrong way and you meet somebody else that moves 10 paces in the wrong way, he doesn't bring you back to zero. He brings you 20 paces away. Like, that's how that works. So I think, there are not many areas of my life, and I say that not being able to think of any one at the moment, where I don't consider the big picture and how I make decisions. There have been a lot of people over the years. I remember I was associated with this one guy, complete piece of shit, who I was doing business with. And I told him basically I was backing out of any business association I had with him for reasons that were more moral and ethical than anything. And his reply to me was, in obvious disbelief, you don't have any idea how much money you're leaving on the table. Because that's what he thought I was tracking, because it was what he was tracking. I can't associate myself with people like that. I don't give a fuck how much money I'm going to make while doing it. I know how to make money. I make very good money, but I will never sell a component of my identity just to make more of it. I know a lot of miserable motherfuckers with Maseratis, right? It's just not an approach to life that I'll ever subscribe to. You're on Saxo writes, I feel like that's just using someone who can get something you want for values and morals don't match, right? And I think I just commented on that. Obviously, I agree with you completely. Jamie writes, look who thinks they're too good for us now, that they're going to school, have a job, but there's the person sticking their nose up in the air at a friend whose success they're scorning. And it's absolutely true. And, I remember, my father was Puerto Rican. My mother, Irish Italian. My father was born and raised in Puerto Rico. He moved when he was, I think, 12, 13 to the Bronx from Puerto Rico. My mother was raised in Brooklyn. So I always had this very dichotomous, family relationship. With the white family, I was the Puerto Rican. With the Puerto Rican family, I was the white kid. And one of the things that was very common for me when I was with the Puerto Rican side of my family is I would get insulted really by my cousins for talking white. This is my white boy cousin, and he talks white. And, where I grew up, in the Bronx, it's not a concept that's foreign to me, this idea of somebody talking white. And, if you don't know what talking white means, it basically just means grammatically correct English, right? And it is the perfect example of people who are deficient, but will use somebody who is not deficient in the way that they are. They will criticize those people lest they actually hold themselves accountable for the deficiencies that they currently have, you know. Because they would say I spoke white, I talked white. Like I wouldn't think for it to be logical to say, well, you talk Puerto Rican. Like, what the fuck does that mean, right? It's like, no, I speak proper English, and you speak like somebody that was raised in the ghetto. Like that's what's the dynamic growing up. So I understand that there is something to the insecurities rearing its head as criticism and rejection. Like it's the bucket of crab model, right? Magoo says, it sounds like resource covers more than money. Can you provide another example? Yeah, so resource is just anything that we have to offer, right? It could be time, it could be energy, it could be insight, it could be money, it could be assets, like if I have a car to lend you to go to Home Depot, like if I have a way to fix a jujitsu move, and I know how to fix somebody's jujitsu that they're having issue with. Like these are all resources. It's something that I could offer you that you would have value for, right? So money's certainly one of them. Actually, obviously, money's the universal quantifier of resources that society agreed to trade in place of bartering, right? And I'm not getting any deeper on that topic, so start your shit in the comments. All you motherfuckers watching right now. We'll leave that as that. All right. What does Corey write here? Corey writes, starting to exceed team of guys I've been working with. A few of them over 15 years get split up, and some of us transferred to other work sites. We've gone through a lot together. Personal life changes along with the job itself. We became strong together. It's really tough knowing we'll never be the same, but I feel the strength gains will last forever. It's the right mindset to have. And let me offer my take on this for everybody watching right now. Every alliance has an arc. Every alliance has an arc. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. How this changes, or the almost exception to this, I don't think it's an exception, but what to an observer might consider to be an exception, is when the relationship evolves, right? So I'll use as an example, White Boy Pat, right? A lot of you guys watch my podcast back in the day. My co-host, one of my best friends, my black belts. White Boy Pat started as a student. He started a student who there were so few white people in my school that usually they had a white attached to their nickname, right? So he's White Boy Pat. And Pat wasn't this, elite level athlete. Everything's like, no, he was a workhorse. He was smart. He was a workhorse, but he was a student. He was a fucking a bucket of nothing, when he started. Kept working. Went from being a student to eventually opening up another jungle gym, eventually being a black belt. Eventually, he and I now have other business interests together. Our family is connected. Our children hang out and have relationships. Like that is an evolution. But here's the thing. The arc that he started with the student, that has been over 10 years now. We're on to many different levels of the alliance, as an example. So every time, and again, the realization of this is an argument for gratitude. It's like that, and I'll use Corey's example with that work crew that's about to get broken up. It's like that's the argument of being grateful for that time that you guys had together. Part of that is understanding that it's not going to last forever. So you're that much more present when you're there. I'll give you another example. If you guys have ever seen the movie, the 13th Warrior, Antonio Banderas played an Arab that was with a bunch of Vikings, and they beat like these fucking crazy motherfuckers in the mountain. He was traveling from the Middle East, and the Antonio Banderas character, he came across these Vikings. He went on this epic adventure, right, with these Vikings. An incredible epic adventure that the movie was. And at the end of it, spoiler alert, he went back to his country, never to see them again. Right? And I understand it's fiction. There are probably amounts of examples of, historical examples of things like this really happening. But just using this movie as an example, just think of the grandiosity of what the experience was amongst all these people. And at the end of it, he went home because the arc was over. Right? The arc was over. It's like being at a great party. Great parties always end. Right? Sometimes they end completely. Sometimes they just end in being great. Right? Sometimes it's time to go home. Right? So it's really, again, it's being conscious of the things that we have of value in our lives at any given moment, understanding that they're not going to last forever. Right? And that's where gratitude comes in. Garm says, based on the book, Eaters of the Dead. That's right. And I'll be honest, and I appreciate you writing that. I wouldn't know that if it didn't say that in the credits. Right? Right on. Maybe I should read that. I'm always looking for a good book. Magoo writes, and we're going to end here. This is going to be the last one, guys. The angst towards being in front of normies is real. However, I did initiate someone this morning. I wrist locked her and she laughed. Your Venn diagram is undefeated. Magoo, just don't get your ass in trouble. All right. We'll make this one the last one. Corey just wrote one. I don't want to ignore him. Gratitude is always what I feel. And even though I'm not perfect, I never took my guys or my job for granted. I'm thankful for the experience and memories. Wilson MC, I really appreciate that wisdom. As always, you're very welcome. All right, guys. I think that is a good, natural conclusion to the talk. Man, I had a good time. You guys got me fired up today. I appreciate you guys participating at the level that you always do. As a reminder, I think all you guys get my email, but if you don't, link is in the description, or you can go to masterchim.com/email and you can opt into my email newsletter there. It's free. I send one every morning. If you are not getting it, it's probably because it's in your spam folder. So go check it out, confirm, do all that stuff. But I'm here every Wednesday, noon Eastern Standard Time. Having a good time. Appreciate you guys every time you guys spend it with me. And I'll see you guys in a week. So as always, brothers and sisters, pressure to power.